I never thought working night shifts would make me feel so invisible. At first, I welcomed the quiet. The office dimly lit, phones silent, just the occasional flicker of the computer screen reminding me I was still awake. Got used to it. Had to. My partner and I had grown distant long before this job. We lived together, sure, but it felt more like we were just sharing space. He'd be asleep when I left, barely mumbled a goodbye when I returned. Conversations were dry. Connection, non-existent. But I told myself it was just a phase. Everyone goes through them. Then came Mr. K. My boss. Technically the department head. He rarely interacted with the night shift crew. Except for some reason me. I noticed it the first time he stayed late. It was around 2 a.m. and I was refilling the printer. He walked in like it was midday, suit still sharp, tie loosened just enough to look effortless. He smiled. Just a slight twitch at the corner of his mouth. "Burning the midnight oil?" he asked. I laughed politely. He watched me for a moment longer than necessary, then walked away. That look sat with me longer than I liked to admit. Over the next few weeks, he started popping in more often. At first, it seemed coincidental, maybe he just had a lot of work. But then he started bringing coffee. "Just for me. Thought you might need this," he'd say, handing it over like it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. Not when my own partner hadn't done anything thoughtful in months. I told myself it was just kindness, politeness. But deep down I knew better. There was this one night he stayed past midnight. Everyone else had gone home. It was just us and the sound of the vending machine humming in the background. Talk. About life mostly. He asked questions, not surface-level stuff, but the kind that made you feel seen. "You always work this hard," he said, watching me type away. I shrugged, trying to play it cool. "Work doesn't argue back," I said. He laughed quietly, but his eyes didn't. They looked sad. He said he knew what I meant. I started dressing a little differently. Not obvious, but I noticed myself doing it. Straightening my hair, applying gloss before my shift. For a man who barely touched his phone when we talked. Who listened like it mattered. It felt like someone had cracked a window open after years of stale air. I didn't know if it was real or just in my head. But I looked forward to those nights more than I cared to admit. Then came the night that caught me off guard. Friday. I thought I was alone, wrapping up paperwork when I heard footsteps. I turned, and there he was, leaning against the doorframe like he belonged there. "Didn't want you to be alone tonight," he said. He wasn't smiling. He looked serious, like he'd been holding something back for a long time. That moment changed everything. After that night, I couldn't shake the feeling he left behind. It lingered longer than it should have. I told myself it was harmless, that people crave connection when they're starved for attention. But I started noticing how often I checked the clock, hoping he'd show up again. And when he didn't, I felt it, disappointed, empty. Home, things only got worse. My partner barely noticed me anymore. He was glued to his phone, chuckling at messages he never shared. He called me paranoid when I asked. Said I was being insecure. But I wasn't stupid. I knew something was off. It became clearer how alone I was. Meals were silent. Our touches felt robotic. He never asked how my shift went, never cared if I ate. Sometimes I'd talk just to fill the air and he'd nod without listening. I stopped trying. At least at work, someone looked at me like I mattered. Mr. K's visits became more frequent. He never pushed boundaries, never said anything inappropriate. But his presence alone was enough to pull me out of the fog. He noticed everything. "You seem tired," he'd say gently, or "You all right?" And for once, I didn't have to lie. Could just breathe. One night he brought me tea instead of coffee. "Helps with stress," he said. I asked him how he knew I was stressed. He looked at me for a long second. "Because you remind me of someone who used to hide it well too." That was the first time he talked about his past. A 10-year marriage, emotionally starved, full of silences and missed chances. He said he left when he realized staying was killing him quietly. I didn't say much, but his words stayed with me. I understood that kind of slow death. I was living it. The more we talked, the more it felt like we were building something unspoken. He'd ask me things no one else bothered to. What I dreamed of, what I used to love before life got heavy. I told him I used to write poetry, that I hadn't in years. He said, "You should." Simple, but it struck me. My partner hadn't asked about my dreams in years. And here was someone who listened like they mattered. I started laughing more at work, feeling more like myself. I knew I was treading on thin ice, but I didn't care. At home I started seeing everything with new eyes. The small betrayals, the emotional neglect. I wasn't imagining them. One night my partner left his phone unlocked. I didn't mean to snoop, but it lit up beside me. A message popped up from a name I didn't recognize. "Last night was amazing. When are we meeting again?" My stomach dropped. I didn't cry. I just stared. All this time I'd been blaming myself for drifting. But he had already let go. The next night Mr. K walked in again. I didn't say a word. I just looked at him. He looked at me like he already knew something had changed. And he was right. Something had. I told myself I wouldn't cross the line. Emotional connection was one thing, but this was different. I wasn't that person. I had never been. But the truth was, I didn't feel like I belonged to anyone anymore. Not at home, not in that relationship. I was just existing beside someone who had already replaced me emotionally. Maybe even physically. The message I saw haunted me, not because of the cheating, but because of how little I felt when I read it. I wasn't angry. I wasn't heartbroken. I was numb. Like it had been coming for a long time and I had just caught up to it. So when Mr. K showed up again 2 nights later, something inside me had already shifted. He didn't say much that night. He brought coffee, the kind I liked, and sat across from me in silence. There was no tension, no pressure, just quiet understanding. After a while he said, "You don't have to keep pretending you're okay." That's all it took. I didn't respond right away. I just looked at him. And he looked back like he saw every version of me. Tired, conflicted, guilty, honest. Felt raw, like something breaking open. I reached out, not even realizing I was doing it. He didn't pull away. His hand covered mine, steady, warm. It wasn't just about attraction. It was comfort. It was years of silence finally met with someone willing to listen. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. He stood, gently pulled me in, and the weight I had been carrying for years started to slip away, piece by piece. Kissed him first. I didn't plan it. Just happened. And once it did, nothing felt wrong anymore. Felt like breathing again after holding it for too long. It wasn't reckless. It wasn't lust. It was something much deeper. Like finding someone in the middle of a storm and realizing you'd been drowning long before they showed up. We didn't speak when it was over. We just sat there, close but quiet. My mind was racing, but my body felt still for the first time in months. I expected shame to flood in, guilt to wrap around my throat. But it didn't. Instead, I felt clarity. I had been loyal to a version of love that had stopped loving me back. When I got home, my partner was asleep like always. I watched him breathe, wondering if he had ever felt guilty sneaking around. Or if he'd already rewritten the story in his head to make it my fault. I didn't wake him. I didn't ask questions. I just stood there, realizing that whatever we had was already over. What happened with Mr. K didn't end my relationship. It only confirmed it had already died. And in that quiet, I knew I couldn't go back to pretending. Something real had started in a place I never expected. Something I didn't want to lose. The morning after, everything felt different. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I just felt still, like I had finally stopped running in circles. The guilt never came the way I expected. What came instead was this strange sense of honesty, like I had finally done something that matched how I felt inside. Pretending hadn't saved anything. Loyalty hadn't changed him. And silence hadn't protected me. So I stopped all of it. I waited for the right moment, but it never came. So I created one. That night, I sat across from him at the kitchen table and told him I knew. The messages, the distance, the way he pulled away months before I did. He didn't deny it. He barely flinched. He just leaned backside and said, "You weren't exactly here either." Like somehow my emotional absence cancelled out his physical betrayal. Like we were even. But we weren't. 'Cause I tried. Stayed. I gave him time he didn't deserve, patience he never acknowledged. And in the end, all he did was blame me for giving up after he already had. I packed my things the next day. Not because I had anywhere else to go, but because I couldn't keep shrinking in a place that kept forgetting me. I left quietly. No big speech, no final fight. Just a note on the counter, short and honest. "This isn't home anymore." I didn't reach out to Mr. K right away. I needed time to understand what had happened, what it meant. I wasn't looking for a rescue, and I didn't want to use him as a rebound. But he called a few days later just to ask if I was okay. That's all. No pressure. No expectations. Just, "Are you okay?" And somehow, that simple question meant more than anything my partner had said in months. We met again. Nothing happened. We just talked. About work, about how strange everything had become, about the silence between choices and consequences. He didn't try to make promises, and I didn't ask for them. We both knew the line we crossed couldn't be undone. But it wasn't just about that night. It was about everything that led to it. Two people quietly falling apart, finding each other in the middle of separate storms. I'm not calling it love. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But it was something real. Something honest. And sometimes that's all a person needs. To be seen without being fixed, to be wanted without being used. Now I'm on my own. Starting over. Figuring things out one day at a time. I still work nights, but they don't feel as heavy anymore. I write again. Small things. Lines that sound like truth. I don't know what comes next, and I'm okay with that. Some endings aren't loud. They're quiet choices made after too many nights of feeling invisible. And if someone ever asks me why I walked away, I'll tell them this. I didn't leave because I fell for someone else. I left because I finally remembered what it felt like to matter.